Welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today we're exploring a stack of sources built around the book Idea Flow. It's by Jeremy Utley and Perry Klebahn from Stanford's D School.
Right. We've got the summary, some Q&A stuff, quotes,
Yeah.
all centered on this big idea. How do we actually consistently generate the ideas we need, for solving problems, for innovation?
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack the core concepts from these sources and figure out how we move past just waiting for those rare flashes of brilliance.
Yeah, how to cultivate something steadier.
Yeah.
A reliable flow of ideas. That's the promise, transforming how you tackle challenges and unlock your creative potential.
Right. We're going to look at why generating lots of ideas isn't just, a nice to have, but maybe essential. Then get into practical ways to boost your own idea flow and your team's too.
And the crucial bit, testing those ideas, really testing them in the real world.
Yeah, and where inspiration actually hides, maybe in unexpected places, and, what to do when you hit that wall, the creative block.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So the foundational idea here, it seems, is that innovation isn't really about these, isolated home runs.
Right, not just breakthroughs.
It's more about cultivating a consistent, reliable flow of new ideas over time. They kick off with that powerful Victor Hugo quote, something about an idea whose time has come.
Yeah, irresistible force.
Yeah.
And then they jump right into a story from Perry Klebahn himself, his time at Patagonia.
Ah, right, the post-9/11 story.
Exactly. Huge external pressure. The team felt it, and, instead of innovating, they got conservative, risk-averse.
And the result?
An uninspired product line. It's a really stark example of how that kind of fear, playing it safe, can just, kill creativity, even at a place like Patagonia.
Which leads them to this pretty bold claim. Every problem is an idea problem.
Every single one.
It's not just for the creatives, the designers, the R&D folks. They frame creativity as, a fundamental skill for problem solving.
Right.
In any role.
Yeah, no matter what you do. And this is where they bring in the term idea flow.
Okay.
They define it pretty simply. It's measuring the number of novel ideas you generate for a problem over a set time.
So idea flow as a metric, a tangible way to sort of gauge the creative health of a team. Is the tap flowing or is it jammed?
Exactly. And what's interesting is how they connect it directly to psychological safety.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, a high idea flow, they suggest, isn't just about talent. It points to an environment where people feel genuinely safe sharing ideas. Even the half-baked ones, the silly-sounding ones.
Right, without fear of being shut down.
Precisely. And the flip side, low idea flow could be a warning sign. Creative stagnation, maybe lack of trust, lack of safety.
So the message for leaders is pretty clear then. You have to actively cultivate creativity.
Yeah, prioritize it. See, problems not just as roadblocks, but as, opportunities for ideas.
And crucially, they emphasize valuing the quantity of ideas generated at the start, not demanding perfection right away. That commitment seems key.
But, thinking about that strong focus on quantity, it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Does just measuring the number of ideas tell the whole story? Does it really capture the full picture of creative health?
Good point. Could focusing only on quantity miss other things? The context. Or if the ideas are even feasible. Or maybe just generating noise.
Exactly. Or could it lead to burnout? Idea fatigue, if you don't have a good way to manage or filter them. There's other research, like Teresa Amabiel's work, suggesting, not all ideas are worth chasing equally.
Right. So it's not just about volume. It's also about managing that volume effectively, which is maybe a nuance to keep in mind.
Definitely. A balance is needed.
Okay. So if cultivating idea flow is the goal, how do we actually do it? The book argues it doesn't start in some fancy lab. It starts with, your daily routine, how you manage your time.
Yeah, consistent practice. They use this comparison, these two leaders, Jim and Jen.
Yeah.
Jim is, maybe familiar, constantly swamped. Urgent tasks, emails, stuck on that hamster wheel. He thinks he'll get to the creative stuff after he clears his workload.
Which never happens.
Exactly. Never happens. He feels trapped.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been Jim at some point. What about Jen?
Jen's proactive. She's strategic about her schedule. She actually prioritizes time for planning, for creative thinking. Blocks it out, delegates well, isn't just reacting all day.
And the result?
Her team's productive, innovative, driving growth because they actually have the space to think.
That really hits home the point that creativity isn't just some magic talent you're born with.
Right, it's a skill.
A skill you build. And like any skill, it needs practice and the right mindset. focusing on the process of generating ideas, not just the pressure for perfect outputs, allowing for experimentation.
So how do they suggest putting this into practice day to day? One technique is the idea quota.
Idea quote.
Yeah. Commit to writing down 10 ideas every single morning.
10 ideas every... Wow, that sounds intense. Why 10?
The logic is it forces you to shift from focusing on quality to just pure quantity, like reps at the gym.
Okay.
It loosens up those creative muscles, helps you get over the fear of having bad ideas. Just get stuff down on paper.
A daily brain workout. Got it. What else?
Then there's seed sleep solve. This is about tapping into your subconscious.
Okay.
You seed by really dwelling on a problem before bed. You sleep, letting your unconscious mind chew on it.
Okay.
And then you solve by being ready to capture ideas that might pop up during lighter activities the next day.
The classic shower thoughts, or ideas while walking the dog.
Exactly those. Then the discipline of documentation. Write ideas down immediately, wherever you are.
Because your memory is terrible.
Basically, yes.
Mm.
Memory fails. Documentation creates this personal resource, this bank of insights you can draw on later.
Which connects to the next one, right? The rigor of review.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They say you should regularly go back through your notes, your documented ideas.
Why look back? Aren't we focused on moving forward?
Because reviewing can spark new connections.
Yeah.
You might see links between old thoughts and current problems you missed before. It can reignite ideas or lead to totally new ones based on that older material.
Okay, makes sense. Like composting ideas.
Kind of. And lastly, padding your schedule. This isn't about slacking off.
Right.
It's intentionally building in buffer time. Time for exploring, for tangents, for experimentation, not just wall-to-wall rigid efficiency. And leaders really need to model this, prioritize it.
So putting these habits together, it's not just about having more ideas, it's about building confidence in your own creativity.
Exactly. Creating that personal space where it feels okay to generate stuff without instantly judging it. It thrives on practice, mindset shifts, and giving yourself room to explore.
Okay, so from individual habits, the book shifts focus to teams and, brainstorming sessions.
We've all been in those painful ones, right?
Yeah.
A company hits an urgent problem, calls brainstorm, and it just falls flat.
Yeah. The book talks about why, right? People are uncomfortable with ambiguity. Fear of looking dumb.
Totally. Leads to really timid, safe suggestions. They call it democracy in desperation. Everyone just throws out the obvious to fill the silence.
And no real breakthroughs happen.
Right. Conventional brainstorming often just churns out those safe, unambitious ideas. So the authors really hammer home the importance of volume. Generating a huge number of ideas is key. This ties into something called the equal odds rule.
Equal odds, meaning any single idea has a pretty low chance of being brilliant, so you need lots of shots on goal.
That's the gist. More swings, better chance of a hit. They cite this idea ratio that successful creators might turn out something like 2,000 ideas for every one that's actually viable.
2,000 to 1. Wow.
Yeah. So creativity really favors quantity, at least initially. Reminds me of that Kevin Kelly quote, something like, a multitude of bad ideas is necessary for one good idea.
You got to generate the junk to find the gems.
Exactly. You have to get it out.
So how do you actually do that effectively in a group, not just end up with polite, boring ideas?
They recommend mixing group and solo work. Don't just do the big group thing. Alternate. Team sessions for energy and sharing. Then individual time for deeper reflection and solo generation. They call it the innovation sandwich.
Innovation sandwich. I like that. Why does that help?
It helps prevent the group from latching on to the first few ideas too quickly, gives people space to develop their own thoughts away from the group dynamic.
And you have to tackle those psychological barriers too, right? The biases.
Oh, absolutely. Recognizing things like the creative cliff illusion. Thinking you're out of ideas when the best ones might actually come later if you just keep going.
Right, pushing past that initial feeling of being drained.
Or the anchoring bias, where the first ideas mentioned heavily influence everything that follows.
Yeah, everyone just riffs on the first suggestion.
So they suggest ways to counter that, like having people generate ideas before the meeting starts, or deliberately throwing in diverse, maybe even kind of weird anchors to broaden the thinking right from the start.
So a simple process might look like?
Yeah.
Get diverse people in the room, maybe have them bring some initial ideas, do some warm-ups, maybe break into smaller teams, follow a structured process.
Yes, and crucially, after you've generated all that volume, dedicate real time to reflect together. Look for themes, connections, distill the insights. It helps process the ideas and energizes the team for what comes next.
So rethinking, brainstorming, prioritizing quantity first, using smart dynamics like the sandwich can really supercharge that initial phase Accepting that terrible first drafts of ideas are okay, even necessary.
Exactly. It's about iteration.
Okay, so you've done it. You've generated hundreds of ideas, maybe. Now what? The book says the very next step is crucial. You gotta test them.
Yeah, this section kicks off with that great Richard Feynman quote. We are trying to prove ourselves wrong as quickly as possible.
Because only in that way can we find progress. Love that. Actively trying to poke holes in your own ideas.
It's fundamental. They bring up the Silicon Valley Bank example, SVB. Teams there were actually generating ideas, prototyping, getting feedback.
Don't get so far.
But when it came to selecting which ideas to move forward with, the decision makers often leaned towards the lowest risk options, even if other ideas had potentially much higher impact. That loss aversion kicked in.
Ah, the fear of failure. Choosing the safe bet over the potential game changer. That's a huge challenge in organizations.
It really is. Cognitive biases, risk avoidance. It makes selecting the right ideas incredibly hard.
So what's the solution they propose?
Building a testing pipeline.
That pipeline.
Yeah. The beauty of it is it takes the pressure off that initial selection. You're not deciding whether to launch the thing immediately. You're just deciding whether to test its core assumptions. Testing becomes your way of forecasting, gathering real-world data instead of just debating opinions.
And this testing needs to be ongoing, right?
Right.
Not a one-off.
Continuous. They stress that no matter how much of an expert you think you are, you need real-world data. They point to examples like GM Maven or Keller Williams database issues, big launches that stumbled because key assumptions weren't tested properly beforehand.
So what kind of tests are we talking about? Big, elaborate pilots?
No, quite the opposite. They advocate for quick, low-stakes tests. Scrappy tests, they call them. The goal isn't exhaustive validation. It's gathering useful data rapidly. Fast feedback loops.
So instead of one massive, scary bet, it's more like a portfolio of smaller experiments.
Exactly. Diversify your bets. You don't need every test to be a winner. You're learning from all of them, especially by comparing how different approaches fare in the real world.
And when deciding what to test, they mention looking beyond just feasibility.
Right. They talk about evaluating based on excitement. Does the idea have the potential to truly delight someone? That excitement, they argue, is the fuel that keeps innovation going.
Interesting. Not just, can we build it, but will people love it?
Yeah. And none of this works in a vacuum. You need a culture of testing. A visible place could be a corkboard, a shared doc, whatever, where tests, findings, lessons are shared openly. It makes experimentation normal, expected.
So integrating rapid experimentation, focusing on real-world insights, that's how you guide the process. An open, flexible pipeline means learning, adapting. A culture that embraces trial and error, that's where sustainable innovation comes from.
Definitely. But, thinking critically again for a moment, does innovation only hinge on these rapid, scrappy tests?
Good question. Is that the whole picture?
Could focusing just on quick experiments sometimes miss deeper issues, like underlying organizational problems that are the real barrier? Or maybe the need for more thorough, upfront market research before you even design a test?
Yeah, like understanding the customer's actual job to be done, as Clayton Christensen talked about, really digging deep into the problem before rushing to test solutions.
Exactly. So while the book's emphasis on scrappy testing is super valuable, maybe the most robust approach involves supplementing it. Pairing that rapid iteration with deeper validation, a more profound understanding of the problem space. Finding that balance.
Okay, let's dive deeper then. How do you test effectively? The book makes this critical distinction. Behavior trumps surveys. Always.
Oh, this is illustrated so well with the story of that real estate company trying to fix the dead fourth floor of an urban mall.
Right.
They brainstormed, and the idea that got everyone excited was a beer garden.
A beer garden. Sounds plausible, maybe. People like beer.
Totally. Seemed like a fun idea.
Yeah.
So to test if people actually wanted it, they surveyed diners downstairs in the mall.
And the survey said?
Overwhelmingly positive. Like 85% said they'd be interested. So based on that survey data, they built it. Big investment.
Okay. I sense where this is going.
Yeah. Beer garden opens. Crickets.
Yeah.
Hardly anyone showed up.
Wow. All that stated interest just vanished when it came time to actually go up there.
Exactly. That's the huge lesson. What people say in a survey often has very little relation to what they actually do. Real desirability is proven by behavior, how people spend their time, their money, their attention. You gotta, as they say, dangle it in front of them and see if they bite.
So the focus has to shift away from just can we build this towards do people actually want this enough to change their behavior?
Yes. And the way to find out is small-scale, real-world tests, not just asking hypotheticals.
But people resist testing, right? Fear of failure, risk.
Sure. So they suggest strategies, address objections up front,
Hmm.
but mostly start small,
Hmm.
really small, inexpensive, simple tests that give you real behavioral data. If that looks promising, then you can build towards bigger tests.
Prototyping is key here, I imagine. Quick, cheap versions.
Essential. Low-cost iterations let you test different approaches fast without getting bogged down in bureaucracy. It's all about iterative learning, those feedback loops, getting input from real users interacting with something tangible. Think Nike, Adidas, constantly testing prototypes.
Netflix gets mentioned here too, right? Their whole evolution.
Classic example. Started with mail-order DVDs, but they used incremental low-cost tests constantly, validating assumptions, exploring new ideas like streaming before making massive bets.
So what are the action steps for doing this well?
Okay, key things. Design simple tests that measure behavior, not just opinions. Have clear hypotheses, know exactly what behavior proves or disproves your assumption. Gather data, ideally using existing metrics as a baseline so you can see the change. Close the loop, review the findings, learn, adjust, inform the next test, build that culture of learning. And, crucially, be willing to pivot based on what the data tells you. Stay flexible.
And speed matters. More tests, faster learning.
Velocity is key. Quicker learning, quicker progress. And remember, failure is learning. An experiment that fails tells you something valuable and saves you from investing more in a dead end.
So innovation is this cycle. Ideate, act, test, learn, repeat. Rapid testing, real-world feedback, focus on desirability first. That builds agility, deepens insight.
Absolutely. And to make this even more concrete, the book is packed with examples of companies actually making the world their lab, applying this experimental mindset in real situations.
Okay, give us some examples. How does this look in practice?
All right, like ISI, the pharma company. Bill Gibson used super simple tests, like A/B testing subject lines on internal emails, just to build a culture of rapid learning, even supporting complex stuff like Alzheimer's research.
Wow, A/B testing internal emails shows testing can be applied anywhere.
Anywhere. Or man crates, selling gifts for men. John Beekman tested demand by advertising concepts on Facebook before making anything. Selling before making. He used clicks and actual interest to decide which products to pursue.
Brilliant. Using ads as cheap demand probes.
Totally. Cybex, the fitness equipment company. Bill Pacheco had prototype handlebars for treadmills. Instead of endless debate, they just put them in a local gym. Real user feedback in the real environment drove the decision.
Get it out there and see what happens. Simple.
Westpac New Zealand improved their banking software by creating a direct, continuous feedback loop with the branch managers who actually used it every day.
Makes sense. Talk to the actual users constantly.
Bridgestone needed to test a diagnostic mat concept for rideshare cars. Instead of a costly tech prototype, they used simple vinyl mats to simulate the experience. Got feedback on the core user needs without building the complex tech first.
Vinyl mats, another great scrappy test.
Yep. Lend-Lease, the property developer. Natalie Slesser tested demand for suburban co-working spaces, not by building one, but by running low-cost Facebook ads for the concept. People clicking showed real interest, leading to the successful The Local Office. It showed how data can help you move forward without needing formal permission first.
That ad testing theme again. It seems really powerful.
Very. And then you have Maname and Ravellaw. They embraced imperfection, launched low-fidelity versions of their products early, knowing they weren't perfect, specifically to get that crucial user feedback for iteration. Proving desirability mattered more than initial perfection.
Get something out there, even if it's rough, just to start learning.
Exactly. And finally, BJ's Restaurants. They wanted to learn from service errors, so they creatively designed experiments, like simulating order mistakes, just to see how customers reacted and how they could improve the recovery process. They realized failing to learn from mistakes was the real failure.
Wow, intentionally simulating errors to learn. That's bold. These examples really drive it home. Iterate, test assumptions simply, learn from real-world feedback. It's about reducing risk and making smarter bets. Just get out and test.
Okay, so you're doing the habits, pushing for volume, testing everything. But how do you keep those initial sparks coming? Where do the truly new ideas originate consistently? This part's about finding inspiration and it's deliberately shaking up your perspective.
Because ideas don't just appear out of thin air, right? They often come from combining existing things in new ways, so you need good raw material.
Precisely. You need inputs. And the quality and quantity of your ideas get a huge boost from diverse inputs. We're talking diversity in all its forms: background, thought, experience, expertise. Diverse teams just perform better, make fewer errors, innovate more.
So how do you actively get that diversity of input, not just hope for it?
Intentionally engage with people different from you, people who disagree with you. Look at historical examples like Xerox, PRX, or Bell Labs. They deliberately brought different disciplines together.
Engineers, artists, scientists, all mixing it up, creating those unexpected collisions.
Exactly. Techniques include things like creative collaboration circles groups, meeting regularly just to share ideas, challenge each other, like Ben Franklin Junto, or actively engaging customers through councils or co-creation, seeking out unexpected collaborators, deliberately talking to people from totally different fields. Darwin corresponding outside biology is a great example.
And that idea of inexperienced experience bringing in novices.
Yes, because they ask the questions the experts have stopped asking. They don't have the ingrained assumptions. That Patagonia story about the junior employee driving surfwear innovation because they didn't know it was impossible, that's the power of the fresh perspective.
But to get those different views out in the open, you need psychological safety.
Absolutely critical. People have to feel safe, sharing half-formed thoughts, challenging ideas, disagreeing without fear. Pixar's daily feedback sessions are mentioned as a way to build that muscle for constructive critique. Leaders have to model this openness.
And beyond getting input from others, it's about shaking up your own perspective too, right?
Yes. New ideas often seem weird at first because they challenge how you already see things. Opportunities are often hiding in plain sight, but you miss them because your perspective is fixed.
Like Perry at Patagonia missing the Under Armour opportunity.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
He was locked into Patagonia's frame, couldn't see the crossover potential right in front of him. You need strategic awareness. Actively, listen, look, notice things outside your usual bubble. Lower those mental barriers.
They also mention finding better problems. Sometimes the issue isn't a lack of ideas, but focusing on the wrong problem entirely.
Right. Identifying significant, meaningful problems is often more important. Engaging with new technologies systematically can help spot future problems, too.
What are some tools for shifting perspective?
Assumption reversal is a good one. List your core assumptions about a situation, then deliberately flip them. What if the opposite were true? It can reveal surprising possibilities. Empathy interviews go deep to uncover real needs and behaviors, not just surface opinions. Ask specific, probing questions. Listen hard.
And extended observation, just watching patiently.
Yeah, it takes time. But observing people interact with things in their natural environment can reveal deep truths you'd never get otherwise. Rewards lie on the other side of boredom, as they say. You have to push past the obvious.
And underpinning all this is curiosity. Cultivating strategic curiosity.
Manage it. Make it intentional. Let it drive deeper observation and exploration.
So intentionally seek diverse inputs. Actively work to shift your own viewpoint. Challenge assumptions. Use empathy and observation. That's how you uncover those hidden opportunities.
Building right on that idea of shifting perspective, the book zooms in on the power of questions. How you frame the problem is everything.
John Dewey's quote again. A problem well put is half solved. Framing with curiosity is key.
They used the Delta Dental example. They did empathy interviews, had insights about oral health, but needed a spark for idea generation. The question they crafted was, how might we convince people who care about their appearance to care about their oral health?
Connecting oral health to appearance, vanity, that's a specific angle. What happened?
It led to a flood of ideas, including the Dazzle Bar concept, a retail prototype that reframed dental care around beauty and aesthetics, making it appealing, not clinical. It worked because the question unlocked a different way of thinking.
Shows how a provocative question can really open things up. Dull question, dull ideas.
Exactly. Curiosity drives innovation, and a good frame sparks curiosity. Interestingly, they find that specific, well-crafted questions often generate a wider range of ideas than vague ones. How to improve toothbrushes is way less generative than the appearance angle.
So the technique is to build a portfolio of frames, crafting multiple how might we questions for the same challenge.
Yes, how might we? Or HMW questions are fundamental. But you need the right scope, not too broad, fix healthcare, or too narrow, change button color. Find that sweet spot that invites exploration. And keep generating multiple HMWs to sustain the flow.
They mention using dials to craft questions, like changing the scale.
Yeah, zoom in, zoom out. Ask, how might we solve this for one person? Then how might we solve this for 1 million people? Changing the scale reveals different facets.
What about other framing methods?
Subtraction is one. What happens if you remove a core element? Like the Chirps founders realizing people didn't want to see the insects. Subtracting the visual led them to cricket pattern?
Removing the ick factor. Smart subtraction.
Right. There's also unidea generation. Brainstorm the absolute worst possible ideas. It sounds silly, but analyzing why they're bad can break conventional thinking and sometimes point towards unexpected good ideas, the opposite of the bad ones.
That could be a fun icebreaker for a stuck team.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And constantly. Immersing in the customer experience helps you find those real friction points,
Yeah.
keeping your framing grounded in actual problems people face.
So curious, well-phrased HMW questions, framed in different ways using techniques like subtraction or scale shifts, are crucial. They ignite and sustain idea flow by opening up new perspectives you wouldn't otherwise see.
And just to loop back slightly, creativity needs fuel, right? Raw material. Those new ideas usually come from remixing existing ones. So abundant idea flow demands that you constantly feed your brain with diverse inputs from the world.
It's not just an internal process. You need stuff coming in.
Exactly. They tell the story of William Shockley and the traitorous 8 at Shockley Semiconductor.
Right, the birth of Silicon Valley, essentially.
Kind of. Shockley, despite being brilliant, was autocratic. He dismissed his team's interest in silicon, insisting on germanium. So the 8 left, formed Fairchild, and, well, the rest is history.
How does that relate to inputs?
The book frames it as a creative collision. When innovative energy gets blocked internally, it can burst out externally. It highlights that these collisions of ideas, sometimes challenging the status quo, are vital. You need to allow for them. And you need the diverse inputs to collide.
And gathering those inputs needs to be seen as real work, not just goofing off.
Yes. Leaders often overlook this. You have to intentionally expose yourself to different experiences, different ideas.
How? What are the techniques?
One is the Wonder Wander. It's a purposeful walk, maybe in a stimulating place like a museum or a busy market. But you go with a problem in mind, actively looking for connections between what you see and your challenge.
So using the environment as idea fuel.
Exactly. Walking itself boosts divergent thinking, but adding the framing question makes it strategic. You could ask, how do they solve problems like mine here?
Okay, what else?
For something deeper, analogous exploration. This means immersing yourself in environments related to your problem, but not identical. Like the semiconductor guys visiting hotels and florists.
Hotels and florists for semiconductors still sounds wild. Why?
Because hotels and florists deal with complex logistics, supply chains, customer experience issues, just like semiconductor firms. Observing how they handle analogous problems can shatter your industry assumptions and spark totally new ideas.
Oh, okay. Finding inspiration in how other fields tackle similar types of challenges gets you out of your echo chamber.
Precisely. And this needs to be a habit. Consistent practice. Consciously expose yourself, read random stuff, change your commute, visit different places. It prevents stagnation, keeps the input hopper full.
So keep feeding the creative engine. Diverse experiences, inputs from everywhere, encourage those idea collisions. That's how you sustain the flow.
Now, even if you do all this, there's one guarantee. You will get stuck sometimes.
The dreaded creative block.
Yep.
Happens to everyone.
David Ogilvy called it the tyranny of reason. Overthinking, judging ideas too soon, blocking imagination.
But James Webb Young said getting stuck is actually a crucial stage, part of the process, not failure.
Right. The message is, expect it, don't panic. But how do you know you're genuinely stuck, not just needing to push a bit harder? Mark Hoppelmazine from Hyatt mentions signs like tunnel vision, just banging your head against the same wall, or opening your notebook and finding nothing. Just empty pages staring back.
Okay, you realize you're properly stuck. What's the strategy? Grit your teeth and power through.
Often no. The book argues that pushing harder past a certain point is actually counterproductive. The key strategy is tactical withdrawal.
Tactical withdrawal. Sounds fancy, meaning just stopping.
Intentionally stepping away from the problem. But it's strategic, not just procrastination.
How is it strategic?
Because it lets your subconscious mind take over. While your conscious mind is resting or focused elsewhere, your subconscious keeps working, making connections, processing all the stuff you fed it. Those aha moments often come when you're not actively thinking about the problem.
Like Einstein in general relativity. Stuck, stepped away, talked about something else. Boom, insight the next day.
Perfect example. Your subconscious can assemble novel combinations once the conscious mind gets out of the way, especially if you've already exhausted the obvious paths.
So what does tactical withdrawal look like? Napping.
Napping can work. Also, leisurely walks, hobbies, light distractions that absorb you but aren't too mentally taxing. Switching to a completely different kind of task. Contemplation. Anything that shifts your focus. Paul Simon listening to gospel music totally outside his genre when stuck on bridge over troubled water is another example.
What kind of distractions don't work?
Overly stimulating ones?
No.
like binge watching a complex drama. It can just overwhelm your brain, not give it the space it needs to wander productively. Lighter distractions are better.
And this needs to be okay culturally too, right? Not seen as slacking.
Crucial. Leaders need to model it. Destigmatize stepping away as a valid, productive part of the process. You have to give yourself permission to.
Is there a key rule for making withdrawal effective?
Yes. Don't talk about the problem while you're withdrawing. Let your conscious mind truly rest from it. Allow the subconscious the space to work.
So embrace getting stuck as normal. Use tactical withdrawal strategically. Try different mediums, walk, listen, read, move. Let ideas gestate. It's a skill.
Exactly. So pulling all these threads together, the book presents creativity as this art of possibility. It's about exploring many paths, not prematurely committing to just one.
Which feels different from how many businesses operate, always looking for the one right answer quickly.
It does. But they argue that rigorously testing lots of ideas actually reduces risk compared to betting big on a single sure thing. Because, as they say, very few sure things actually play out as planned. Testing widely increases your odds and your learning.
And idea flow shouldn't just be a concept, but a core metric, something businesses track.
Yes. Track it. Foster a culture that supports it, assign clear ownership for driving idea flow and testing around specific problems. That prevents those endless meetings where nothing new gets generated or decided.
So the creative leader isn't just approving things at the end, they're involved early.
Engaged early, normalizing sharing rough, half-formed ideas, assessing how the organization actually supports ideation and testing, modeling creative behaviors, creating space for exploration, and really important, celebrating the lessons learned, especially from experiments that didn't pan out.
And building this creative competence, it's like any skill. Practice makes you better.
Better at problem solving. And when you share insights, you build a shared language, which fuels collaboration. It fundamentally changes how you approach challenges, makes it more dynamic, more expansive, maybe even more fun.
And they suggest seeing opportunities for practice everywhere, even waiting in line.
Yeah. Use those mundane moments. Practice reframing small frustrations. Look for connections. Challenge your assumptions about why the line is slow. Turn everyday life into a creative thinking gym.
Okay, that was quite the deep dive into idea flow. We really covered a lot of ground. Why that consistent flow matters, not just occasional sparks.
Right. How daily habits, the quota, seed, sleep, solve, documenting, reviewing, padding, amplify your personal flow.
The power of generating sheer volume in teams, rethinking brainstorming with things like the innovation sandwich.
And the absolute necessity of rapid real-world testing. Behavior over surveys, always. Using scrapping tests in a pipeline.
Finding inspiration through diverse inputs, shaking up perspectives using assumption reversal or observation.
Using curiosity to frame problems effectively with how might we questions. Encouraging those creative collisions.
And finally, understanding that getting stuck is normal and using tactical withdrawal as a strategic tool.
All these pieces, they argue, fit together. They build this continuous engine for innovation, moving from just hoping for good ideas to actively cultivating them.
So why does this matter to you listening right now? Well, whether you're tackling huge organizational challenges or just trying to find fresh approaches in your daily work or life, cultivating your idea flow gives you a practical path.
Yeah, it's about expanding your sense of what's possible, increasing your odds of finding solutions that work, making a bigger impact, maybe.
So here's a final thought to chew on. If, as the book claims, every problem is an idea problem, and if you can genuinely build your capacity to generate and test ideas, what seemingly impossible challenge, big or small, could you start to make progress on today? Maybe just by asking a better question, or committing to that daily idea quota tomorrow morning, or running one tiny scrappy test.
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.